close to you. And speaking in terms of students, every other month, actually, we do have a show dedicated towards, talking and coming together, identifying the issues in the education system of Pakistan, and then providing solutions. We do try to engage different stakeholders as well. But this time I felt like exam stress is such a real thing. And right now, for all the people watching, for all the students especially watching, I'm pretty sure a lot of you are going through your exams as well. CIE is happening, semesters, end term and midterm exams also happening in different universities, whatnot. And exam stress is a real legit thing. And I tell you what, because I'm almost done with my master's now, it does not end. You can't really say that after primary school you'll be stress-free and then you can go on with, have all the fun. It never ends. So what is this environment that creates such sort of stress? And is there any way we can reduce the stress as to make this process of examination and the process of learning enjoyable for students? To talk about this, I felt like it's very important to engage an educationist who's been in the field for so long and who's actually, mashallah, doing so great as well. Ladies and gentlemen, she happens to be an educationist for quite some years now in an institution that, of course, we're going to name in a while. She happens to be the senior headmistress over there. And she's doing a lot to improve the education system of that particular organization and then eventually of our country as well. This is none other than Miss Musarrat Jahan Zeb. Hello, assalamu alaikum, ma'am. Welcome to my show.
Walaikum assalam, Shiza, and thank you so much for having me on the show. And I'm so glad you touch upon this such sensitive issue on a very right time.
I know,
you forgot
right?
to mention in your intro, metrics are they've already started.
Oh, yes.
And in fact, I had to deal with a parent and a child in the morning. The child was actually going through a lot of, anxiety, and I had to have a talk about that. I mean, it is perfectly all right to you just go and have your exam done, and inshallah, things are going to be okay.
But anxiety is natural, yes. But Ma'am Musarrat, what I'm happy about, while you're happy that we're discussing it, I'm really happy that it's coming from your perspective. I'm a student over here, so I'm going to, put forward my issues that I may have faced throughout my education experience. And you speaking from that side, first of all, I have to appreciate the fact that you do realize this is natural. Exam stress happens to anyone and everyone. But how to deal with that?
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good question, Shiza.
And
as you said, that having exam tension is all right. In fact, it sets the tone for your, center of focus. You have your, vision and dreams that you want to achieve, and this helps you develop some mindfulness if you're taking an exam pressure to a certain extent.
Okay.
But if it's going beyond to the limits where it starts taking its toll on your mental health and you actually reach a point where you start developing medical conditions, then it's exactly a matter of concern for all the stakeholders who are involved in this.
Right, absolutely.
So if we actually look into the factors that contribute towards exam tension and anxiety, I would mainly describe them as three.
Okay.
The number one is the educational and assessment system itself.
Yeah.
Number two is the parental pressure.
Okay.
And number three, I think, is the student's behavior itself. So if we begin with the examination and the assessment system itself, we so inevitably are bound to assess what we teach.
True.
And I mean, I won't speak, I'm working with a very, very advanced system of education. I'm so glad and blessed that Beacon House
has some very... But I think it's also good to mention over here that she works as a senior headmistress for the Beacon House school system, which is actually bringing good name to Pakistan in terms of improving the education system continuously.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. But I would, in fact, speak about assessment and education system at large about Pakistan.
Yeah, generally.
So because Beacon House does have some very modern ways of assessment and education and learning in the classroom. So one of the factors is very, very traditional style of teaching and assessment, and we fall back on very traditional ways of assessment, which is pen and paper. So students, instead of learning skills and developing skill sets, they're focusing more on still learning the concepts by heart.
Right.
And that is eventually what we are assessing. And I think that is one major reason of anxiety and the pressure that children go through during exam and throughout their student life.
I agree.
Number two is, I really liked what you said about parents that, especially in our culture in Pakistan, we do compare children with each other, so much so we compare them with the siblings.
Exactly.
We would compare them with the cousins. We would compare them with all the class fellows of that child in that
Malik
very
saab ke
setup.
bete ke zyada number kyun
Gee,
aaye?
exactly. Falan ki bachchi ne to, they've got straight A's. How come you haven't been able to score that?
Yeah.
So I think we need to have some counseling sessions with the parents, because parents are very important stakeholders.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to reduce the tension and anxiety for the child and making learning more fun for the child, I think parents play a very major role in that. And their own behavior towards the child performance is very, very important.
Right, and absolutely you're right, Ma'am Musarrat. Well, you know, when we're speaking about the stress and anxiety that exams or education at all causes to teenagers especially, I think I've given out this fact of information before as well, but just to discuss further, you know, I was reading a research report sort of which spoke that the level of depression generally people all around the globe had in the time of Great Depression in the early 20th century, that compares to or equals to the general level of depression a teenager has nowadays.
Exactly.
Do you realize how intense, absolutely intense that is? And I think you very rightly pointed out the three factors that contribute most.
But I haven't really touched upon the third one.
Yes, please go. I was going to say.
I think that plays a very major role.
Okay.
I mean, unfortunately, I mean, a child of today is full of potential and they have a lot of options open. I think children need to have a very, very focused approach towards education. And instead of making it a big burden for themselves, they need to take their learning into chunks for themselves.
Right.
So a lot of children who do not really have very designed program of revision and reinforcement for themselves actually face more anxiety and pressure during exam. So I think the students' own behavior and their own mindfulness is actually, I think you need to take one bit of it. I mean, of course, education system itself have to play a great role. They need to make learning more fun experience for the children. But students have to realize their end of responsibility as well. And that is, there are certain levels where you would require children be able to reinforce and revise certain concepts. So if they don't really have a very consistent, regular program for that, so that is going to eventually cause them a great deal of stress.
I do agree with that, because at some point in my life, I was one of those students who would literally procrastinate and leave everything for the last night. So when the next day the exam is happening,
and then you have sleepless night.
Exactly.
I just referred to you about a child I met in the morning. You know what was the concern coming up by the parents? That she stopped sleeping. So, you know, so this is what, this eventually is going to cause her medical condition.
Right, absolutely.
So, yes, if you have a very, very consistent approach to learning, if you have a regular reinforcement and revision program designed for yourself, you have regular hours every day where you sit back and revise what you would have done and certain skills that need reinforcement. So, I think you can better deal with it.
I do agree with that, and I think everyone should take that up. Being a student, I think you become so reckless in terms of, you know, realizing what your future might hold for you, that you forget that it's entirely your responsibility to make a timetable for yourself. And when I say make a timetable, it doesn't generally mean, you know, oh, XYZ hours I'm going to study, XYZ I'm going to close the book. No, by timetable I mean just regularly revise what you've been, you know, educated about, what you've been told about, so that when it's time for you to be assessed, you at least know the basics about it. But now, ma'am, coming back to the education system, where you identified it's one of the problems, of course, but when we talk, it's a generic term, education system. There are just so many levels to it that we cannot probably talk about in just 25 minutes. But to begin with, it is the biggest organizations like IBM and Google saying that we do not require degrees or a paper of degree anymore, a stamp, you know, paper showing that, okay, I studied from this institution. Rather, we require a skill set. And if you have that eligibility, you know, fall under that criteria, we would hire you. Do you feel like we really are going to be sticking to the university or the degree system in the near future as well? Or is it important?
Yeah, I think it is important to have a very, very clear skill set developed for the children, and this requires a great deal of fine-tuning in the curriculum that we have in Pakistan in general. I mean, I'm fortunate to work with the classroom that is very learner-centered, and we have, I mean, teacher training program at place which promotes, you know, approach to students center, and then children are very, very active learner and active part of the learning that is happening in the classroom. But I think unless we have our focus shifted from assessment of learning to assessment for learning, which is not to actually assess a product, it's actually to assess the process of the learning which the child is going through. We're not really going to be able to have children produced who can, you know, have skills ready for them to be able to utilize in their real life. I mean, the world is moving towards 21st century skills. I mean, we cannot really think beyond, you know, a classroom where children are not able to have their communication skills develop, where children are not really collaborating within and outside the classroom with the outer world. I mean, how could we have the challenges met at the global level if children are not really able to learn 21st century skills.
Absolutely.
So I think, yes, the curriculum and the education system in Pakistan at large requires a
lot of
deal
change
changes.
and
Yes.
a lot of people to actually engage with that
and
as
I
well.
think teacher training is one very important factor that can contribute towards changes that we are looking forward to. I mean, if we compare our educational system with very advanced, developed countries, like recently I was reading about Finland educational system. So I mean, if you see their learning is very, very real life. People are moving towards project-based learning. People are moving towards assessing skills. And we're falling back on very, very traditional style. Yes.
Old school.
Yeah, exactly, old school thought.
Right, ma'am, I do agree with that. But where you said, teachers training is an important part. So I'm sort of going to make it, contextual and speak about your institution specifically, because it does have a modern approach towards education. So some of the teachers that I've been in conversation with, I hate to say this, but they were offended with the idea of the whole teachers training. Because if you are the imparter of the knowledge, you do not require knowledge. You know what I mean? That concept is pretty old school, but that needs to be changed.
Exactly.
How are you going about that?
The teacher herself is a learner, and that's one thing teachers never should forget. Well, at Beacon House, we fortunately have a very strong structure of school-based professional development at place. And if you're referring to teachers, I don't know which system they're working with, but I'm sure if it is an external training that you're referring to, or they were feeling apprehensive about, so that is pretty possible. But the newest model in professional development, which is school-based professional development, is very, very stress-free, is anxiety-free for the teacher, because that is one way where teachers are transferring their stress to students towards it.
Right.
So I mean, if teachers are really paying attention to their professional development, that is how they learn the modern ways of teaching, and that is how they make their classroms more interactive and learning fun for the children.
That is so important.
Yes, Beacon House is paying a great deal of attention to teacher development. Alhamdulillah, I've had the privilege to work with teacher training for quite a few years in the past, and I've been working as a teacher trainer as well. So we have very regular target setting for the teachers with their consent, where they plan their own professional development plan. We call it PDP. And they keep a very good track of what they're learning and how they're implementing that back in the classroom. They maintain their portfolio of learning, actually.
That's
so
great.
We have people who've been trained to actually support the whole process.
That's
so
actually
we have,
great.
Yes, we have designated people at school level who are actually supporting the whole process and making learning a culture of the school, actually.
And you're basically engaging people at all levels, right?
Exactly.
So you're not just, you're sort of denying the whole concept, or let's say the setup of superiority, that this comes above you and this does not need any schooling and you do X, Y, Z, which is actually great. But now coming to the exam stress itself, ma'am, I have to, talk about something over here. When I was in my 3rd grade, I was okay at studies. Of course, I was always in the top 5, but I was never the first in the classroom. I always tried. But in my 3rd grade was the first time when I developed having a migraine, and it was so bad. Imagine, it was so severe. I didn't know what a migraine is, man. Like, I was dying of headache, and I went to a hospital to be, spending at least 2 days there, because as a child, they could not figure out and I could not figure out why it was so intense and why it was literally killing me. To which they were like, "Oh, are you having exams?" I was like, "Yes, I'm having my exam just, 2 days later." And then they realized, okay, this is exam stress. That was the first time I was introduced to exam stress. Again, I have to confess over here, till date, I still don't know how to cope with that. But that does for sure cause a lot of stress. Now, you being the teacher, how of course, we'll come to parents later, but how can you reduce that?
Yeah, I think I would not really talk about teacher alone here, because this is the...
Yes, please go on. Okay. And I think it's very also important to, see over here, while you mentioned teachers, yes, are a part of it, but parents, massive part of it. So you, I think, at home first need to judge the caliber of your child. If they're not really willing to, perform that, well, I'm not saying just leave them, be it, but I'm really saying just don't pressurize them. Now, yeah, let's hear it from your mouth.
Shiza, I think Allah Ta'ala has created every child as an individual, and has blessed that child with an individual potential that can be exploited and utilized in any ways.
Absolutely.
So what we need to start doing most often is identify their individual potential and celebrate their own level of achievement.
Agreed.
Not every child that you come across can be a high achiever. Not every child that you come across and have you in your school or have you in your house can be a high achiever and can top. But then they do achieve to certain level, and then they have their certain aptitudes. Some children are not going to be very good at maths, but on the other hand, they're so creative.
Absolutely.
And so we need to celebrate their level of achievement. That is what schools need to do more often. I mean, it is all right to be celebrating speakers, it is all right to be celebrating mathematicians, but it is all right to be celebrating an artist as well.
Absolutely agreed.
So,
Absolutely.
secondly, I would seriously request parents, they stop comparing their children and stop worrying about their future. See, Allah Ta'ala has promised risk for every child.
Absolutely.
So why do we think that by putting children through all this pressure, we can do something different for their future? So Allah Ta'ala has designed His own plans for every individual. I'm sure we led towards this. All that parents need to do is support children completely, have certain routines set for them at home, encourage them to be consistent in their learning, and appreciate whatever they achieve.
And also sort of try to develop a rewarding approach as well, you know, sets incentives. Like I think, again, I've mentioned this before as well. So as kids, me and my elder sister, we're just, you know, a few months apart, actually 1 year apart. So we're age fellows, basically. We did not, as kids, enjoy going to, you know, learn Quran classes and whatnot. So always our teacher had to call our parents and be like, Tabir Shiza kahan pe and stuff. So what my mom did was, okay, if you go learn a surah today, when you come back, you will have your favorite chocolate hidden in the room, and then we can have a hide and seek and you can find. So it was fun, right? She was engaging us. And then eventually we, you know, recited the whole Quran. We tried to learn it by heart as well, which was amazing.
Shiza, what you refer to is called extrinsic motivation, and it is all right to a certain level to have certain element of extrinsic motivation involved. But I think what is more important is intrinsic motivation of learning. And you know, I'll go back to what you said about Quran learning. Had we ever made it comprehensible for our children,
I agree,
had we ever refer Quran teaching into what children are doing in their real life and made it actually a real life, because that's a book for you to follow.
That is reality.
I'm sure, I mean, any learner, including you and I, would have liked Quran more.
We have
so what
enjoyed
actually
it,
is happening in the classrooms now is we're living in the world of bubble. I'm not talking about Beacon House, I'm talking about education in general. And we're not really, you know, relating the stuff we are dealing with the real life experiences of children.
True.
You know, so I earlier mentioned about project-based learning, and you know, the essence of project-based learning is you knit the learning around what children are experiencing in their real life, and that gives you such an edge of assessing the process, let the child have a sense of achievement for himself, celebrate what he would have done, and then you have some, you know, project design. And you know, this saves a lot of time in teaching for teachers, where teachers are going through a lot of pressure of designing assessments. So I mean, PBL is one ideal way of doing it. When you have the subjects integrated, you're now assessing certain skill set, and you're not really worrying about assessing an individual subject itself.
So I think my question to you again is, please try to explain it to me, if it's possible for Pakistan to have this system, or any country at all though. Like you mentioned, there's a certain assessment that teachers need to do in terms of what the kid is interested in, the child of course, right? And let's just say up to grade 5, if the teachers were to assess what they are interested in, is it possible for the education systems to be built in such a way that grade 6 onwards, there's just one particular thing that you will study in detail? Like this comes at a university level, right? If I were to specialize in journalism, I would choose a bachelor's degree in journalism, like MBBS, like BDS. Can this happen at an earlier stage?
Well, this is seriously a very tricky question, because I think that cutting children off to a primary level where they would not be offered more subjects and they actually focus on one very subject of their own interest becomes very challenging. And I think that educational system would require a great deal of revamping, which I don't see happening in near future. But what I can suggest is that integration of subjects is something that is going to help, one thing. And if you really want to make learning fun for the children, have assessment for learning. This is AFL strategies that I'm talking about.
Okay.
You need to see at each and every point, and while going through the process of learning, you need to assess every step how much the child has learned. And not only that, it's not the teachers who assess all the time. This is students' self-assessment, which is very, very important and matters a great deal.
Right.
I mean, they need to be educated and trained how to see their learning and how to look at the skill sets they would have developed.
Okay.
So I think involving children in the process of evaluating themselves and have self-evaluation done is another very way of, having children develop more interest in learning.
Okay, one more thing, Ma'am Musarat. It's actually, I don't want to say it's coming from an envious Shiza, but it is sort of, I'll tell you what. Students who have their parents as the teachers, not necessarily in their own schools, but anywhere, I think that parent, of course, has a dual advantage because he's seeing from so many perspectives. So the student naturally will have a better attitude towards studying, naturally will know how to make a timetable, how to go about it because of the experience that the parents have as a teacher as well. So they do have an advantage. I've seen this in my niece as well. My sister happens to be an educationist, and she's, mashallah, so different than we were at that age as a student. So for those students who have no such guidance, because there are hundreds of them, what are your tips to them?
Seriously, Shiza, that is no formula.
Really?
And yes, that is no formula.
Okay.
But of course, I mean, a parent being a teacher will have more empathy for the child.
Exactly.
Understanding the fact that what kind of pressure children go through and how learning becomes very hard if we don't give them an edge. But I think we need to really have this tuition culture and the academy culture snubbed off and taken off of our life.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of the parents, I mean, irrespective of they are in education profession themselves or not, they have actually promoted a great deal of academy and the tuition culture.
Right.
And that is another very, very important factor in the stress and anxiety that the children face. Now, this is the same very poor child who's spending 6-7 hours at school.
I know.
And this is the same child going to the academy, doing the same stuff over and over again. So what has happened now, the children have found, since they are very, very smart, they found an easy way out. They would either have the school life distracted or they would have only the academy life utilized for socializing.
Right.
So we need to see what we actually are doing for them,
That's
we need
so
to
true.
give some break to the children over here.
I never thought of it like that. And it does make sense now because what I always thought, I did need some tuition at some point when I was applying for my, I would say universities because I was not that intelligent. I always felt like whenever you need extra help, there should be extra help because not everyone has that, of course, level of intelligence and caliber. But if you're getting the right kind of guidance in your school hours, why do you need to go through that all over again?
Exactly. Shiza, I fully agree with that because you use the very right word that if there's the right level of support available for the child. And I tell you, schools like Beacon House, we are designing individually learning program for the children. We're catering to diversity in our classrooms now, where children are actually supported in the area they are weak at. So I think this, when we talk about teacher training and we talk about revamping our education system, so this is what we need to see. We need to know how do we cater to diverse need of learning.
Absolutely.
How do we cater to the children who have issues with maths, maybe issues with the language, maybe, and academies and tuition centers are actually no solution to that.
That's true, and people do go to socialize over there. I was one of them again. But ma'am, you very rightly said, we do have to take a different approach towards this, all of this entire thing as well. And this is not just one person's responsibility, ladies and gentlemen. It falls upon the shoulders of the student himself if he wants a better life as a student, because there's no cutting it off. I'll tell you, there's no, it doesn't happen like that if you're in your 5th grade, you'd be like, I wish I could just stop studying and reach over there when I'm done with my university. You really have to go through all the steps and processes. So why not, take it from the horse's mouth itself and make it a better journey. So towards the end of the segment, ma'am, because we've had a lot of, insight from you, it's great enlightenment for people like me. Some real life tips probably for the students out there or the parents out there on how to deal with exam stress.
Yeah.
It's the season.
Thank you so much, because this is something that I keep sharing with my students and parents very often. For students, I will say, be mindful and be very, very focused on what you are doing. I mean, and for mindfulness, they can start meditation. Meditation is one very good tip for children to have mindfulness and be able to focus on certain tasks. For parents, I would say, please stop heading to the pressure of the children. They're already in a very, surviving in a very competitive world. So if we keep adding to the pressure of grades and, you know, getting good marks and being on top of the class, so that is not really going to help them. So there are certain things we should be doing in collaboration as all stakeholders. So I think somewhere down the road, all schools, parents and children will have to have, you know, a collaborative approach towards revamping and, you know, fine-tuning our educational system so that the learning is actually a real fun for children, and we have been able to develop certain skill set that children will have at the end of the day.
That's great. Absolutely true as well. And ma'am, I think credit's due where it's due. I'm going to appreciate the fact where you mentioned before this as well, like how you have an inclusive approach at your school where a teacher will cater to the different needs of different students, because it's only natural to understand as well if one person is dealing with 40 different mindsets, 40 different backgrounds in 1 hour, 40 minutes a lecture, right?
Exactly.
So teacher does definitely have to have that approach where she's catering to all of them as well. Realize it in a different way though. You're teaching a class of 40, you're teaching 40 different, you're teaching a doctor, an engineer, a guitarist, a painter, I mean, a stay-at-home mom, a stay-at-home dad, people that you don't know what they will grow up to be, people that the caliber you cannot realize it just by looking at them. So this inclusive approach is absolutely important for teachers and schools to have. Thank you so much for setting the standard as well. And thank you so much for being in conversation with me early in the morning, ma'am.
It was a great pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
It was absolutely my pleasure too. So ladies and gentlemen, education system is, well, I want to say it's not perfect. No education system in any part of the world is perfect, but we're on to it because it's great to see that students, along with the teachers, along with the parents, everyone is having a collective, collaborative approach to improve that. Right now, we're going to do a very short break, but when we come back, we will have a different perspective. A student who actually is going to tell us how to expand your mind and, you know, go beyond the horizons of your own mind as well. Stay tuned to find out more. Good morning. Welcome back to World This Morning, which is a Hashmi, ladies and gentlemen, where today, being the responsible citizens of Pakistan, we are discussing and putting forward the issues that we feel exist in the education system of Pakistan, and then sort of engaging all the stakeholders that are a part of the education system. Generally speaking, not on the ministerial level, I'll tell you why, because when we hear it from a teacher's mouth or when we hear it from a student's mouth, that is first-hand experience, and that is what we need to work on. So in this segment, I felt like I need to have a perspective from a student who has studied here in Pakistan and also has had the pleasure or the opportunity to study abroad as well. So maybe we can have a fair analysis and a comparison of what we need to improve or what we need to, change as well. So ladies and gentlemen, I've been joined by someone who now happens to be the cultural ambassador for the US Embassy here in Pakistan. She is also the student leader from the University of Massachusetts, USA. Narmeen Iftikhar, hello, assalamu alaikum, welcome to my show.
Salam. Thank you for having me here.
My pleasure, absolutely. So Narmeen, just to make sure of, you were here in the first segment while I was in conversation with Ma'am Musarat as well, right? So from the conversation that we had, being a student, where do you stand with your perspective here?
Actually, you guys were talking about the differences, like the class difference and also the education policies. So I just felt that there's a lot of pressure of a teacher on a student. Like teacher, when I was young, and even now, when we think of a teacher, there is a danger attached to
fear.
There's a fear. Like there's a teacher, like we must have to follow her. Like in Pakistan, we have been taught that we have to ask for permissions, even for drinking. For drinking, may I go to washroom? May I
enter
drink?
the class? May I?
So this is like we're just some slave. Like this is like we have to follow her, even she is wrong. And there's a other misconception that teacher can never be wrong. Like she is always right, we have to follow her. This was in my mind when I was young, because this is how the system is, our society works. So when I went to USA, I felt that everything was different, particularly the teacher.
Okay.
She was so friendly. She asked me first, you don't have to like call me ma'am or teacher. You just call me by name or whatever you want. Since I just felt the cultural shock, I was missing my parents. I was like so confused and nervous in the class. She was like, whom do you miss the most? I said that my mother. Then you should call me mom.
Oh,
so it was
that's so sweet.
Yeah, that's so sweet. That's how the people are. Like they actually, the thing, the Americans are really encouraging. Their behavior, their attitude is really motivating and encouraging. They'll smile, and they'll smile generally. They'll open doors for you. They'll be really courteous. So this is the thing which is in a part of their culture.
Right, absolutely.
So, yeah. So
it is also. I want to say, generally speaking, it is a part of our culture as well in terms of we are hospitable people. Yes,
we are.
But I want to ask, who were these people who hurt Narmeen over here? It's not nice to be unkind or rude to anyone, let alone women. But all right, Narmeen, for all of those who don't know, let them know what you went to study over there. Was it a summer exchange program? What was it?
So actually, it's a summer exchange program by US Embassy. Every year, it is being announced by the embassy, and we have to apply. There's a whole procedure. I also try to tell people about the procedure on my Facebook and social accounts.
Okay.
So you have to apply, and then there are lots and lots of applicants, thousands of applicants, and then they shortlist only 25 from all over the Pakistan. So it's kind of really
such a big, strong competition, actually.
Yeah, it is. So they pick 25, and then like there's a whole procedure, interviews, and then the final 25 go to the USA. And those 25 consist people from all over the Pakistan. So I was the representative of the Rawalpindi. So it was great in there. So when you go there, you have to study public policy and leadership in University of Massachusetts.
Right. And let me add to this, actually, you are a certified public policy maker. Let us know what that means. And did you go through a diploma for that?
Yeah, it's like they offer you a kind of certificate. It's like they offer you a lot of classes in which you study public policy. And in public policy, we also study the differences their public policy is having and our public policy is having, and also leadership skills. There are also some sessions to improve your leadership skills, to improve your communication skills, and there are lots about cultures, because since it's a culture exchange program, you get to know about their culture and they get to know about our culture. It's like we just keep on sharing our cultures, our norms, our values to each another, and it's really great. We went to raid churches and to the Jewish prayers, and it was really great. We came to know about the diversity. Actually, it's the diversity which is really beautiful.
Right, and it also opens your mind to so many levels as well. I do want to talk about all those things that you mentioned over here, but to begin with, Narmeen, we were speaking about exam stress in the first segment, if you noticed. Globally speaking, a global student who has, let's say, who's either living in Pakistan, who may be living in the US or any part of the world, is exam stress normal to everyone? Did you have it? Did you experience it over there in the US?
No, I didn't feel it in the US because the teachers were so friendly. They didn't pressurize me. But with US students, the students who are with us, they were although the students from the USA who were in our classes, they were having the exam stress. And right now, if I talk to them on social media, they tell me that they are so much in depression because of the exams and they cannot manage their studies, because it is, I guess, the problem globally. It's not just particular in our region.
Yeah, I agree with that, Narmeen. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, you know what happened when she went to the US? She was in a culture shock. And after her experience when she came back to Pakistan, she experienced a reverse culture shock. We will talk about that, but after a very short break. Stay tuned to find out more. Good morning. Conversation with a culture ambassador for the US and also a student right now here in Pakistan, Narmeen. Narmeen, you know, I was talking about how you had a proper culture shock before you went and after you came back as well. But it's great to have cultural exchange programs because it expands your mind to horizons that you never knew you had. So towards the end, Narmeen, is there any message you want to give to the youth of Pakistan in terms of, you know, experiencing different cultures?
I would like to say that believe in yourself. They can do great and they'll do great. I believe that if you believe in yourself, you can do wonders.
Absolutely, that is so true. Believe in yourself. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. It was my pleasure as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end the show with the notion that I began the show with. Please be happy in other people's happiness. Do not envy others. Why can't you be joyous in someone else's achievement? Have the attitude of gratitude and your life shall be amazing. Write on us on Facebook page with the name of World This Morning, on Twitter World This Morning without a G, Daily Motion on YouTube World This Morning and PTV World, and the repeat you can catch at 5 past 11 p.m. tonight. Till the next time, take care. Good morning.